In today's video, we explore 1993's Tyranid Attack game, where plucky Space Marine scouts infiltrate a Tyranid bioship, confronting Genestealers, Tyranid Warriors, and worse. Well, hello folks, and welcome to the channel. I'm Lee, I'm your Oldhammered host. Since Warhammer 40k 10th edition is on the horizon and closing fast, bringing with it a host of new Tyranid models, as well as the 4th Tyrannic War, this seems like a good time to revisit the classic 1993 Tyranid Attack game, billed as the struggle against alien invaders in the 41st millennium. This is a miniatures-based tile-type board game from Games Workshop, and it was showcased in White Dwarf 158 way back in February of 1993. The White Dwarf article says that from the darkness of intergalactic space come the Tyranids, horrific monsters that see all other living creatures as prey to be conquered and devoured. Assault groups of Space Marine scouts lead the attack against the Hive fleet, boarding Tyranid ships in a desperate attempt to destroy them before they reach the inhabited planets of the Imperium. Here's an illustration from the Tyranid Attack Quick Start Guide, which shows a Tyranid bioship. So that's what they look like. So in Tyranid Attack, one player controls a team of Space Marine scouts who are tasked with destroying the vital organs of the Tyranid bioship before it can disgorge its invasion force upon an Imperial world. The Tyranid player, on the other hand, controls an infinite supply of Tyranid Warriors, Genestealers, and Genestealer hybrids within the ship, whose goal is to eradicate the invading scouts, like white corpuscles targeting a virus. It all kind of reminds me of TSR's old Snit's Revenge game from 1977, where rampaging Snits invade the body of a Bolotamus, with the goal of kicking the tar out of its vitals while avoiding the hungry run-and-get-ems trying to kill them. So at first glance, one might assume that Tyranid Attack is a spiritual successor to 1989's Space Hulk First Edition, where Terminator Space Marines battled Genestealers in the gloom of an ancient derelict spacecraft, and I'd say it certainly is, though the full story is a little more complicated than that. So many of you probably remember, or at least have heard of, Hero Quest, the dungeon crawl adventure board game from Milton Bradley that was produced in collaboration with Games Workshop back in 1989. Well, apparently Space Hulk and Hero Quest got married that year, and in 1990 they had a baby, which they named Space Crusade, described in promo materials as a game of deadly combat designed by Milton Bradley's Steve Baker in close collaboration with Games Workshop's Jervis Johnson. Like Space Hulk, Space Crusade takes place within the confines of a drifting derelict starship. However, the fearless Imperial explorers are now Space Marine assault squads battling infestations of Chaos Marines, Orcs, Gretchen, Genestealers, androids, and even dreadnoughts. Space Crusade was released in 1990, as I said, but then later that same year, Games Workshop released Advanced Space Crusade under their own banner, independent of Milton Bradley. Here are the front and back covers of White Dwarf 131 from November of 1990, featuring an epic illustration by the artist Fangorn, aka Chris Baker, who created a lot of classic packaging and cover art for Games Workshop back in the day. The same illustration is also used for the front of the Advanced Space Crusade game box. Here's a spread from White Dwarf 131 showcasing the psychedelic game tiles and components used in Advanced Space Crusade. Pay special attention to those green organic door stand-ups, which apparently were a great source of amusement among the game's target audience. Now let's look at a 1991 ad for Advanced Space Crusade on the left, and a 1993 ad for Tyranid Attack on the right. The games look very similar, of course, though some of the counters were changed from one game to the next. The green organic doorways were phased out. Tyranid Attack boasts a wider variety of aliens. Also, I've read that Tyranid Attack offers simpler gameplay than Advanced Space Crusade, perhaps to make it more accessible. So why did Games Workshop discontinue Advanced Space Crusade and reimagine it as Tyranid Attack just a short time later? Well, I've read that they might have lost or relinquished their rights to the Space Crusade name, and certainly there would be advantages to creating a new game under their own IP using existing components, though on the other hand, one could see how that might cause some confusion with the games appearing so similar. If you know any details behind the story there, please leave a comment and tell us all about it. Okay, with the lineage out of the way, let's take a look at some of the components for 1993's Tyranid Attack game. I have had this box in storage for quite a while, but I have no idea if it's secondhand, third-hand, or what. Though amazingly, many of the figures are still on sprues and a lot of the tokens are unpunched. So it's in pretty good shape for being a 30-year-old game. Alright, let's begin by taking a closer look at the box art. So as I mentioned earlier, Tyranid Attack boasts a wider variety of aliens than Advanced Space Crusade, which I think just had Tyranid Warriors. In Tyranid Attack, you get Warriors, Genestealers, and even a couple of Genestealer hybrids. On the Imperial side, you get 10 Scouts, including 2 Sergeants and 2 heavy weapons, as well as 4 Terminators and 1 Terminator Librarian, though I think those are captives that you have to rescue before you can deploy them on the board. There's also some cool art on the side. Let's take a look at that. So there's a host of classic Citadel miniatures from back in the day. Here are 4 color schemes that one might use for the Tyranid Warriors, and a handy stage-by-stage Tyranid Warrior painting guide, which you also get for the Scouts. Here are some suggested color schemes for the Scythes of the Emperor, the Ultramarines, and the Space Wolves. As I said, most of the figures are still on the sprues, but someone has clipped out the Terminators here with that nice breakable antenna. They also clipped out most of the Genestealers, so I have them and their arms in a separate bag, but no one's been based or painted yet. Here are those double-decker Tyranid Warriors, and they're still on the sprue from 1991. And there's 2 versions of these, one with bone swords and one with a death spitter. And here are the classic plastic Space Marine Scouts. You get a total of 10, so that's 6 regular troopers, 2 heavy weapons troopers, and 2 sergeants. Here's the Tyranid Attack rulebook and quick start guide. One thing I like about it is it says right here that if a rule is not immediately clear, skip it for now. You'll work it out once you start playing. Contents of the box, and even though the game is about 30 years old, I don't think I'm missing anything. I think it's complete. Here are some of the vital organs that the Space Marines have to destroy to incapacitate the ship, and that includes the dermal sphincter. That's it right there, objective marker number 1. So if you capture the sphincter, you can roll a d6, and on a roll of 4 or higher, you can bring in 1 to 6 replacement scouts, if you've had casualties, to help you complete the mission. So they arrive through the decimated sphincter, I guess. Who says GW doesn't have a sense of humor? So there's the energy cortex, there is a sensory cluster, a teleporter nexus, and the respiratory vent. And then there are these cute little acid blobs that kind of keep the Tyranid ship clean. So if a Space Marine scout encounters one of these, it will attempt to dissolve him as though he were common debris. Okay, so the gist of this game is you have a limited number of Space Marine scouts kind of working their way through the Tyranid bioship. In the meantime, however, the Tyranid Warriors and the Genestealers and the Genestealer hybrids are trying to eradicate them. Each of these troop types has its own stats and weapons. Stats include move, armor, range, shooting skill, and hand-to-hand skill, with the various weapons providing certain buffs and abilities. You can even deploy Space Crusade troop types, such as the Standard Space Marines, Orcs, Gretchen, and Chaos Marines, though the last 3 are considered to be Tyranid mind slaves. There are also stats for the rare and insidious Chaos Android, who looks like a Necron prototype, but was actually constructed by Chaos Dwarves. There's a little Space Crusade trivia for you. And if that's not enough, there were also White Dwarf articles, with rules on using dreadnoughts and even Eldar forces in Tyranid Attack. In a standard game of Tyranid Attack, though, the Space Marine player gets 10 scouts, though it is possible to replace casualties during the game or even rescue captured Terminators. How someone captures a Terminator, I'm not exactly sure, but if you find them and rescue them, then they can join you on your quest. So in the beginning stages of the game, the Space Marines will have the advantage because there's a lot of them, but as they get whittled down, they're going to face an endless supply of Tyranids because the Nids get reinforcements on a roll of 5 or 6 each turn. However, if the Marines can destroy the Hive Mind synapse, then the Tyranids only get reinforcements on a roll of 6. Once a Space Marine moves into an unexplored area, as indicated by this exploration card, so this is a new tile that has been unexplored up to this point, you flip over the exploration card and learn what the Fates have in store. So in this case, the Marines have accidentally activated an Assassinator, some kind of floating spherical assassin robot. Other event cards include things like Cocoons, which would yield 1 to 6 Tyranid models on that tile. Prisoners, which allows the Scout Marines to rescue a Space Marine Terminator, which is always handy. And the dreaded Sphincter, which is not the dermal sphincter that the Marines have to destroy, but just a regular sphincter that might open up under the Space Marine and drop him to his death. So that's not a good way to go. But actually, before that exploration card is resolved, there's one important thing that needs to take place, and that is removing the first tile from the board, or the one that's in the first position right now. And hopefully there's no models in that section, because apparently all the hallway sphincters close up and those models are now gone forever. Then you roll a die, and depending on the number, that will determine where this tile goes. But we'll just put it here for now. And you can see through this process that your board might take on a life of its own and sort of grow beyond the available space to play the game, if you're playing on a kitchen table or a card table or something like that. Then this new board section gets an exploration card as well, because it's unexplored. Then the Space Marine character looks at his hidden location tile. He only has one of these, and once he uses them up, he picks another one from the pile. But these represent the location of the organs. So in this case, this is tile number 1 that's been placed. And if that happens to match up with the hidden tile that the Space Marine character has, he informs the Tyranid player, who is then obligated to place objective marker number 1, which in this case is the dermal sphincter, along with 1d6 Tyranid defenders. So in this case, the Space Marines have discovered the dermal sphincter. They know it's right here, but it's in an unexplored area, along with this exploration card. So when the Space Marine moves in and does his shooting or fighting, once his turn is complete, a new tile is placed here or here, depending on the die roll, but let's say it's right there. And this exploration card is flipped over. So apparently our plucky Space Marine Sergeant has discovered a Mind Slaver, which is some kind of a brain slug, and now he is a hapless pawn of the Tyranid, so he will move and fight for them, and his comrades can't even attack him until he attacks them first, because they are unaware. So poor Sergeant. He was fighting the good fight, and now he has a brain slug to keep him company. Okay, so that is more or less the gist of things. The Space Marines are moving through a conveyor belt type organic labyrinth, and the people in the front don't want to get too far ahead of the stragglers, because the stragglers might get trapped on the last tile and be gone forever. And while they're trying to complete their mission, the Tyranids are trying to kill them and either feed them to an acid blob or dump them down the dermal sphincter, which would be an ignoble end to a mighty Space Marine scout. Alright folks, that is our quick look at Tyranid Attack, a classic GW board game from the early 1990s. And obviously we have not played this game yet. The minis are still mostly on the sprues, and the counters are mostly unpunched. And because it's kind of a museum piece, I'm reticent to bust all that stuff out, even though it would be fun to paint those double-decker Tyranid plastics. So who knows what the future holds. Maybe in a weak moment we'll break out the clippers and free all of those Tyranids from their sprues. But until that time, if you've played Tyranid Attack, or Space Hulk First Edition, or Space Crusade, or Advanced Space Crusade, please leave a comment in the comment section and let us know your thoughts about these classic GW and or Milton Bradley games. Alright, I guess that's a wrap for today. Thanks as always for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed today's video. We'll be back soon with some more tabletop wargaming stuff, but until then, take care of yourselves and watch out for those dermal sphincters.